Alright, so this was the weekend of Coco, and we also got Roman J. Ezra Esquire here as well. But obviously this was also the weekend of Black Friday, which I figured, well, Roman Israel Esquire and Coco will still be there next week. So I'll probably just wait till then. But in the meantime, I figured this would be a good time to do one of these. We do at least a couple of these a year where I just run down a few smaller releases, usually anywhere from like 10 to 15 or whatever. I have 12 here that I just wanted to speed through that got limited releases that I've kind of been seeing over the past 2 or 3 weeks or so. So yeah, we'll just do that in the meantime. Starting with Good Time, a movie that this is one of those movies where it was always going to be unfair to watch this late because it's a movie that people are going fucking nuts for. Like, people are crazy about this thing. So I was cautious going in, and it's one of those movies that has your attention immediately just from the poster itself. Like, it's not necessarily like a false advertising thing either. Like, just looking at the poster pretty much gives you the vibe. Like, if you think that's the vibe you're gonna get when you walk in, it is. It's being totally honest to you, which is obviously a good thing. So it starts off, and I intentionally, like, I was tempted to at least read what it was about when I started hearing all the stuff, all the good things about it, but I kind of refrained because it just kind of looked like one of those movies that was like, if I just watch this unravel not knowing a damn thing about it, it looks like it could get really interesting that way. So yeah, I just went in, and when it started, at first I thought it was going to be like a short-term 12 kind of thing with that opening scene with the interview slash test, whatever it was, with the doctor that appears to be Howard Stern's dad, talking to Robert Pattinson's brother, who's played by one of the directors of the movie. And then it's suddenly a heist movie, which is great. And then I realized it's 20 minutes in and we haven't gotten our opening credit sequence yet, so then that happened. And then, yeah, once his brother goes to prison, then we figure out, or jail, whatever, he's being held. We realize that he's going to try to get him out, but then when that turns into the movie, it does not go in the directions you might think if you just say that's the plot. So even if I looked up the plot, I probably still would have been totally surprised by what transpires. And I imagine one of the great appealing things about it is just how non-stop it feels. I did see somebody describe it as like a panic attack in movie form, uh, which is pretty accurate. And obviously this is brought to life by Robert Pattinson continuing to show us that he is one of the most interesting young actors working now, and is making so many interesting decisions, and makes this character that just kind of generally adds to the whole unpredictability of it. Like, the second he walks through the door in the opening scene, we realize that wherever this guy's going to take us in the next scene is probably going to be really hectic, really frenetic, and really potentially dangerous, and we think that pretty much for every follow-up scene as well. Just throughout the entire movie, it's just a chain of them. Apart from the scenes with his brother, I don't really recall, which aren't many. I'm having difficulty recalling scenes without him. There's also the scene when we go through the guy who he mistakes for his brother, that joins him throughout the rest of the movie. That was an unpredictable direction because when it first started and we got his whole story about the Sprite bottle, I just assumed the movie started having ADD. And it was like, why are we focusing on this dude now? But it's because this dude's going to be with us for the rest of the movie, which I should have known. But the movie's just taking us in so many directions we're not expecting, and whenever you think, oh, okay, I think I get the train we're going now, and this is where we're going to end up, the movie just kind of keeps curving on you. And I've said that about a few movies before in the past couple of years or so, but I mean, usually when I say that, it's like, yeah, we continue on this for a while, and then down the road there'll be another turn that we don't expect, and so on. Every turn we don't expect is like the beginning of every scene. It does slow down when we do reach the middle, as movies often do, which I guess this does save it from, running out of gas or wearing itself down. But I do think once he gets, when he starts staying with the teenage girl, while he's waiting for his brother to come back into consciousness, is kind of where it's like the movie hits the brakes, and I think my problem with it isn't so much that they hit the brakes, it's that with the movie being so frenetic around this moment when he's just in this apartment, feels like they hit the brakes for a long time, and kind of, I feel like it kind of threw the movie off its groove a little bit. There's still some of those scenes in there, like a suddenly frantic scene when he takes a drastic measure with a 16-year-old girl to prevent her from seeing his face on TV. But yeah, but then obviously once it gets back, it's going again, and we realize who that other dude is, then we just kick right back in, and not only that, we're even more hectic and frenetic than we were in the first part. And it takes us in a whole bunch of new directions. So yes, I do get the appeal. I do think it's probably a victim of it having been built up to me so much before I went into it, which obviously is not the movie's fault, but there's still a lot of stuff, and the just the aesthetic in general feels really unique. It kind of threw me off when it occurred to me after the fact that these guys, the directors, also made Heaven Knows What, a movie that I fucking hate. I really, really hate that movie so much. And, like, I was almost shaking watching that movie because I just fucking hated it. I just wanted to destroy everybody that made it. And it's astonishing to me that these are the same guys, because this movie is so... That movie was so just... Look at these diseased, disgusting, repulsive characters, and just watch them be disgusting, diseased, and repulsive for a very long time until the movie just fucking ends. And thankfully one of them dies. And then they make this movie that's so alive and is so just a feast on all the senses. And another great thing about this movie is that it's very much inspiring. Like if you're a creative person, whether you write or do photography, video, and otherwise, or anything like that at all, or if you're an aspiring editor as well, just watching this movie will just spark that inside you and just make you want. It will make you want to create again, especially if you're in a slump. I hadn't written in like 3 months when I saw Good Time, and then after I saw Good Time, I was like, yeah, it's time to it's time to fucking kick it into gear again. So that's also very helpful as well. So yeah. I do think it's very... I don't think it crosses the line into greatness. But I do think it's very good and very, very well done. And it's definitely one of those cases where... I know they also made the movie Daddy Longlegs. So they're obviously in this indie territory. But the thing is this movie, even though we have very few characters, and it's... actors who are just kind of coming back in the spotlight, like Jennifer Jason Leigh... it doesn't really feel like a low budget, because it feels like despite being however low budget it was, it feels like a spectacle. So that's really impressive. So yes, I do think it is very good. Once again, I don't think it'll live up to the hype if you read into all that, but it definitely is something to look at, and obviously one of the things to really look at here is how amazing Pattinson is. So yes, I've probably got to go faster if I'm going to get through all these. So the next thing I want to talk about, I actually have to talk about 2 movies in order to do this, because the second movie is Creep 2. I did not see the first Creep until like a couple of days before I knew I was going to see this, because I love Mark Duplass, and I had heard so many good things about it. But for some reason, I just never got around to it, which is weird because the movie's like 1 hour and 15 minutes. There's like no commitment whatsoever to watching that movie, but somehow it took me this long to get to it, which is a shame because I loved it the first movie, and it like really fucked with me. Like it really, this does not happen often. Watching the first Creep, which was very easy because it's just on Netflix. It was one of those movies where I watched it in the middle of the day, but while I was watching it, I knew, like halfway through the movie it occurred to me, this shit's gonna fuck with me tonight. I'm not gonna be able to sleep. And sure enough, that night, like 8 hours later, 8 hours after the fact, after watching it, I'm laying in the dark thinking about Mark Duplass wearing that fucking peach fuzz mask, and I can't sleep for like 2 hours. I swear to God. And I have to go to the second movie now to get through this quickly, but I could go on and on about the first movie. The second movie is different. It's like the exact same movie, but so different at the same time. So he terminated it. So he and the director, whose name I forgot. It's something Bryce, I think. Damn it. I meant to look that up one more time before I started this. Because obviously he's just as much to thank for this, even though I'm going to spend this whole review just praising the fuck out of Mark Duplass. So here we go. The thing about it is this one is a lot more comedic, like you can tell. And like just the way it starts off, and it's like he's worn out with what he's doing. Like he seemed so salivating about the thought of killing people before, and now it's like he's tired of, like he said, a slump. And they use this to comedic effect as opposed to scary effect, even though the way he plays it is so real that there's still definitely creepiness there, for sure. Don't get it twisted. And as we go on and on, you kind of think, well, it was kind of a big is he or isn't he in the first movie, so now in this one we know that he definitely is. What is this movie going to have to offer? Like, what can it do? The first thing it does is give somebody for him to be interviewed by and filmed by that is more of a match than feels like a next victim. He can't scare her the way he could scare Aaron in the first movie. Every time he's... And not only that, she can scare him. So, there's that. And she's just as much into this as he is. She's obviously, you know, creeped out and a bit reluctant, but she feels protected enough that she can just dive right into this, and she's just as much about making a spectacle out of this as he is. And that's just the whole movie. It's almost like they're being competitive throughout the movie in regards to this. It makes it really interesting. But like I said, Mark Duplass is amazing in these movies. Oh my God. He is. I mean, he always is. Like, this is definitely his thing, and he's made some great... Jeff Who Lives at Home is one of my favorite movies ever, but here, he's just really taken this real factor that makes his comedies or dramas, where he makes them feel so real, but he takes that realness, and it's like he betrays you with it. Because he's like, I have perfected putting real life into movies and making you feel that, and now I'm gonna do that with fear. and it works so much. And there are these moments where, like I said, even if they're comedic, there's still something. That image of him, like, submerged in the hot tub, like, up to his neck, when he's just talking to her and he's telling her the story, supposedly, the whole pathological liar angle I really love, because we just never know when he's... It's like watching The Hateful Eight again. Every time somebody has a big monologue, you never know if they're just talking out of their ass. And when he's, like, sitting in this hot tub and he's just kind of telling this monologue to the camera, it just I don't know if it's his eyes, the way he's delivering his lines, or what it is, but God, that fucking image of him looking right into camera, I haven't been able to get out of my fucking head, and I saw this, like, 4 days ago. and it's just really stuck with me. This one isn't near as strong as the first one, but it definitely brings its own thing while also doing it. I also love the kind of play they did on lines from the first movie, are in this movie again, but slightly different. And one that, there's a moment where, I might be saying a little too much here, but it's not as spoilery as it sounds. There's a moment when he seems to attempt to hang himself, and she has to pull him down. And there's a moment in the first movie when, after he says he's talking about the animal pornography and the rape and stuff, and he says to Aaron in the first movie, "Did I freak you out with my rape story?" And then he says that exact same line with that exact same delivery in this, except it's, "Did I freak you out when I tried to hang myself?" And it's like you go from such a drastic difference, but he says it exactly the same way. And it's perfect. It's definitely, if you like, you want to watch these back to back, and if it's true that they still want to make a trilogy out of them, I am incredibly hyped for that. So, because it's like, if they were able to make something the same yet also totally different than this one, I can only imagine what they have planned for a third one. So I really hope that happens. I have no idea what the development plans on that or whatever, but yeah. So yes, a big fan of that, obviously. So going on, the next one's going to be Brigsby Bear, which is a movie that is, I think, I'm kind of vague on who exactly is involved in this. The Lonely Island obviously had something to do with it, and sprinkled throughout. But our main plot is... it's a bizarre thing. This is another movie where I heard a lot of positive things going in, but I don't know that I can be as ecstatic this time. But we have our main character who is in this place with his parents. And his father is Mark Hamill, who shows him this Brigsby Bear show in this little underground place he's been getting. It's like Blast from the Past. Exactly, he was born down here, basically, he thinks. But then it's quickly revealed that this actually isn't his family, this is not actually where he was born, he actually has real parents. Matt Walsh is his real dad, all that stuff. But he wants to continue the Brigsby Bear show while also coming to terms with the fact that the world is not what he thought it was for the past however long he's been alive, which he's in adulthood now, so that's a long fucking time. And it's trying to be this... It's got a lot of Gentlemen Broncos in it, which is a movie I really didn't like. And I don't really care for this movie for the same reasons I don't care for Gentlemen Broncos. If you've seen it, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But it also seems to want to be Behind Rewind as well, and it is very, very distant from the charm and wit and humor that Behind Rewind had. And it seems like it's trying to be really quirky and original while also just having glaringly obvious, you know... I don't know if they were actually inspired by those other movies or not, but if it seems abundantly clear that we don't have too many original ideas in here. Also, with the setup, you get kind of it's like a really kind of elaborate version of Room as well, only like 5 minutes long. And it devolves into this thing where it's like, I guess I can see what people see in it, but it's one of those movies that really wants to... It takes its earnestness and just really just fucking beats you over the head with it. It really surprises me that the Lonely Island guys were involved in this, because when you look at their stuff, it's like, it's very straightforward, it's very broad, and it's like, to think that they had anything to do with this icky sweet bullshit is just, it's weird to me. And it does not hit me in a very effective way whatsoever. I didn't feel remotely emotionally invested in this person. I think there is a big loss on the setup, because like he suddenly, for being a guy that was born in this place, to come out like 30 years later and realize that the world is not what he thought it was, and that these people are actually his blood relatives, and everything here is what the world is. He barely seems fazed. I don't know if that's what they were going for with the character, but you would think there'd be more of that, almost. There'd be a lot of, you know, jokes, or maybe drama, even, with the whole adapting thing. And they do try to throw some drama in there, but it's just so hung up on this being quirky thing, and being sweet and charming, and it just doesn't, like, there is nothing in this movie that rings true to me, like, at all. I kind of liked Greg Kinnear in it, and his character, how they set him up as one thing, but on the inside he's like another, and he's like really invested in this to a weird degree, which is kind of funny, but I mean, for the most part, and on top of that, they do kind of throw in stuff that feels like it'd be Sonny and Lonely Island would do, like, the moment when he's in the place, and he's like, I have a way to get out of here, but it's really complicated, and it just cut to him throwing a TV out the window. And it's like, that seems like a comedy bit from another movie, Definitely not this one. It kind of comes from out of fucking nowhere. And just little bits like that, with the way they set up the story, yes, they do stand out that much, despite being like 3 seconds of screen time. And it doesn't fit together well, and like I said, that really doesn't help that the characters are just... You witnessing it now. I can't even remember the main character's fucking name. And it's... I just really didn't feel anything towards this, except a little disdain. I don't hate it, but I think it's everything. When you see a parody of an indie movie, it's like this movie's trying to be that, only sincere about it. And it's, yeah, it just really doesn't work for me. But apparently a lot of people were really charmed by it. Good for them, I suppose. The next one we're going to talk about is Tulip Fever. Okay, so we have... It's a costume drama. It's that old age plot. It's the plot of every damn costume drama ever. There is a young woman who has to marry an older man. Much to her chagrin. She's forced into it to save her family or whatever. But then she falls for the young artist. And they have to keep their illicit affair under wraps, or else the old husband is going to get really angry. And we have, you know, somewhat comedy relief side characters that just come and go, and every now and then Judi Dench pops up to remind us that she's in it. This is every single costume drama ever made. And on top of that, the director is the guy that made Mandela Long Walk to Freedom. The director of Mandela Long Walk to Freedom has made a blueprint of every single costume drama ever, and it is set in a world where tulips are practically currency. The immediate question you have is, were they intentionally trying to make the most boring movie ever made? Like, it's almost like they were actively trying to bore the shit out of the audience. It's amazing. And I didn't even mention the fact that fucking Cara Delevingne's in this. But, to save the day, if you look at the cast, we have Christoph Waltz as the husband, Alicia Vikander as the wife, and Dane DeHaan as the young artist. So the cast itself helps a lot. Not so much that Cara Delevingne's in it, not so much that one of the comedy relief side characters is Zach Galifianakis. I don't know what the fuck kind of stunt casting that was. Yes, I know he was kind of dramatic in Birdman, but I don't know how this happened. This almost looks like it was done as a joke. And every time he's on screen, that's like... I mean, I would like to think he's a good enough actor to where he can do that. Like, he could be in a movie like this and you could just not say, oh, it's the guy from all those comedies. I'm not going to think about that, though, because this is going to pull me in, right? No, you're totally fucking thinking that the whole time. And he's barely fucking in it, which makes it even more ridiculous that they'd even put that distraction in there. But as the movie goes on, Alicia Vikander, I have complicated feelings about, because I think she's a really good actress. I really didn't like the Danish Girl at all, but I have no problems with her Oscar win because she was so good in it. And obviously there's Ex Machina and other things, like Between Oceans. She just attracts really... Taking Ex Machina out of this, she just attracts really boring, fucking basic material. But she's able to bring it to life. But the thing is every time I see her, if you take out like an Ex Machina or whatever, it's like... she just seems like a really boring choice. Like, I imagine the whole movie around her is going to be insanely boring. I know I'm saying boring a lot, and that's a very dismissive term to use, but I mean, look at the shit we're talking about. Come on. But, yeah, as I said, I think I do like Dane DeHaan, and he certainly has an interesting enough presence to where the movie's not boring when he's there, but I do think there is a case of miscasting here, for sure. Waltz is fine. He's obviously doesn't have anything particularly juicy like he would in a Tarantino movie or something, or even Big Eyes for that matter, or Carnage even. But it's fine. The main three here bring enough life to it. I guess you can throw Holiday Granger and Jack O'Connell are in there as well with their own little side plot that ultimately becomes the plot. And there is something kind of interesting in there where it kind of develops into this whole, well, now we have a secret to keep and there could be potential blackmail or whatever, and so we've got to go around to this and do this whole deceit thing. And this brings the movie a little to life for a while, but then by the time we reach like 20 more minutes, once we think we've gotten away with it, there's still 20 minutes. And then the rest of the movie becomes like really convoluted, and it's like the direction it goes, it's like, oh, well, you just kind of totally gave up on this, didn't you, in that last 20 minutes. So, I mean, it definitely could have been a lot more uninteresting. I think the runtime helps a lot. It's only like an hour 40-something. This is the kind of thing that could have been dragged out to like 2:15 if it was in the wrong hands, but, yeah, the cast does bring it to life, but I mean, you hear the fucking title, and you hear the plot outline, and it's like, you know exactly the kind of movie you're in for. And a lot of people are into that, so if that's the case, I'm sure it'll be, like, just fine if people like that genre, but if you're like me, yeah, and that's, like, your least favorite genre ever, then every now and then the cast finds a way to bring it to life, but for the most part, it's just the flat bullshit it looks like, so, yeah. That's the only thing I don't like about doing these whole rundowns, is it feels like I'm just kind of very surface level, you know, throwing insults and shit, but, I mean, it's also that a lot of movies like Tulip Fever, like, if I were to do, like, the usual, like, 10-minute slot I would do, that's all I would have to say about Tulip Fever, because that's all it has to offer. I've seen this fucking movie like 30 times, just with different actors, except Judi Dench, and sometimes different places, but same shit, yeah, some different faces. That's a really fucking awkward thing to do when there's not another person here talking, but, our next movie is going to be Una. You might remember, like, over a year ago, there was talk about this movie, particularly Ben Mendelsohn, because he was on the Oscar radar, back before hardly anybody even knew what the movie really was. And I believe the first round of predictions we did last year, I had him in mind, because I didn't really know the subject matter of the movie, but I'd heard his name being thrown around, and it's like, well, he's, you know, kind of rising as this familiar character actor, so, yeah, it seems about right. And then the movie disappeared without a trace, and has suddenly re-emerged, and I was able to see it, finally. And the storyline that was apparently so controversial, for good reason I suppose, was that Ben Mendelsohn he's friends with a dude, and then this dude has a 13-year-old daughter. And Ben Mendelsohn takes the daughter, has sex with her, and they go off together. Which is weird. There was a very similar story in the news like a few months ago about that girl and her teacher. And so it's weird that this now. But, and then he abandoned her, and now she has grown up into Rooney Mara, and Rooney Mara is going to track him down. He's, like, changed his name, he's working someplace else, he's started a whole new life, but she's going to come back and confront him about leaving. And there's a lot of complicated things going on here. She's, like, it's not necessarily well, she does bring up, like, you, like, totally fucked up my life with this shit, but it's, like, she's still into him, which is weird. I mean, I suppose it should have made for a somewhat interesting turn, because it's not the direction we're fully expecting it to go when we see the setup. But to where it's like her that's predatory towards him now, as opposed to the other way around now that she's an adult. But the movie is not as interesting as that probably sounds. Not one bit. Rooney Mara's growing on me. I haven't done, like, the whole 180 I've done with Blunt, but I'm starting to come around on Rooney Mara. And she does bring something to this I'm still not totally sure if it's totally 100% good, but she's bringing something to this. And Mendelsohn as well. And it is interesting when you hear this setup, that it basically you hear the movie as these two actors are basically going at it with this setup. And for the first entire 50 minutes of the movie or so, Riz Ahmed's just walking around screaming Ben Mendelsohn's name. Put that talent to real use. But the thing is that these characters, despite this really interesting setup, are not interesting whatsoever as individuals. Not at all. Because we don't really ever know... We don't ever really fully know where the other one's even coming from with this. Because we don't really get any kind of feel for them in the early parts of the movie, the flashbacks in the movie. And then when we're now in the present day and she's confronting him, we're still not quite sure where they're coming from. And it's like, in another movie I could maybe see where little details we get the better, if your intention is to slowly unravel them throughout the movie and have like revelations as the dialogue goes. But not really. We basically get the setup, and then they basically spend the movie reenacting that setup with flashbacks. And then we hear about their moments together in dialogue, but it feels less, like, provocative and engaging and disturbing, and more just like the screenwriters looking for an excuse to put in graphic sexual dialogue. Where it's like... And you just, I don't want to give you an example, but it just felt like they were just trying to, like, freely say extremely graphically sexual things with, like, hardly, I mean, obviously there's, like, context, but it might as well not have been. The dialogue just felt that disjointed from everything else around it, and didn't feel at all remotely, it just doesn't gel, just nothing here. And then we get to, like, our ending, and then it's like, we kind of, that's the thing, is, our ending here basically just says, fuck you to Una. Like, it apparently doesn't matter to this movie if she has a character arc or not. The point is to find out is Mendelsohn's character gonna do this again, especially since he has a young daughter of his own. But the thing is we don't know enough about this character to where when we get that answer, who are we to say it's the answer? But the movie is pleased with itself and ends. And we have nothing to take away from this. We have nothing, there's no, yes, once the movie is over and we've watched this, we have no way to believe what the characters, if the characters are different than they were when it started, or even if they're different from when the flashbacks started. There's just nothing to offer here. It's very just, we're just going to put this dialogue here, but character-wise, no, it's all about the words. But these words have no meaning to them. They have no meat because there's nothing around them of any interest. It's just people fucking talking with no insight on what's going on inside them, which is the whole point of this, is to know how this situation has affected these characters. But this movie doesn't want to tell us that. This movie just wants the characters to fucking talk about what's already happened and leave it at that, basically. And yeah, I think they thought they reached some kind of conclusion, but not really, no. So I also had a friend as well, and the word she used was pretty much exactly it. The word she used to describe it was pointless. This movie has no fucking point whatsoever. So that's unfortunate, given how strong this movie could have been with these two at its center. And you really... I'm not sure why Riz Ahmed was given the part of the other guy. That literally could have just been anybody off the street and they could have done work with this material, so... yeah, that was... yeah. What's the damn point? I really don't know. We're now going to go on to Patti Cakes, which is, it's a very simple story. Once again, a story we've seen many times before, but the question is how they handle it. It's a mixture of Precious and Hustle and Flow, just that the girl's white. That's about it. So, so I guess what I'm trying to say is it's Precious, Hustle and Flow, and 8 Mile. That's actually exactly what it is. Like, I literally need to tell you nothing else. If you have, with those 3 movies in your head as a mixture, in your head you've seen the movie. You might as well have seen the movie just by mixing those 3 movies in your mind right now. But going in, there is something here. There is something charming here. And there is something that the lead actress is able to bring forward. It's very impressive. I think I saw in a Sundance interview or something that she had never rapped before this movie. She had to, like, learn to do that well. So that's, I mean, that's not exactly my expertise, so I can't really say if it's, like, actually, you know, good as far as those standards go. But from what I've seen, it's very impressive if she had never done this before prior to this movie. And the standout in the cast to me was the guy that plays her best friend, Jerry. And basically, much like many movies like this, where a person uses their music talent and starts from nothing and slowly becomes something. Because it's an indie movie, they don't go all the way. Because it's an indie movie, they either don't go that direction or they're just getting there. They're just getting on the radio and then it ends. But what I was saying was the best thing in movies like this is watching them create the music. And once again, we have the Falling Slowly scene, we have the Wolf That Trick scene. We get to watch them build the song from the bottom up, more or less. The PB&J song, with the PB&J obviously being her, Jerry, their new friend Bastard, with an E, and her Nana, who is an almost unrecognizable Kathy Moriarty. That was surprising. Yeah, and we do have this scene. That song, I watched this like 2 or 3 weeks ago when they first put it in Redbox. I still hear that song and its chorus in my head. So that's good. And the end scene is very good as well. And there's a nice little arc here with her mom, who's played by Bridget Everett. But despite the fact that it does have some genuine moments, and the music is surprisingly good, once again, this is another movie where it's like, we've seen this movie. We know all of its beats, if you'll excuse the phrasing, and that's pretty much all it is. But unlike a movie that would just, you know, leave it at that, the important thing to this movie is its characters, and they do keep it afloat enough. I do think the side plot with Bastard, where they're like kind of having a romance thing, is really out of place, and you honestly can't tell where the fuck it even comes from. It's just in there, I guess, because we always have to have the scene, the post-coital scene where the two are just laying there under the blanket. I guess they thought every movie needs that, so this one needs it too. That's pretty much all that amounts to. And it makes the movie a little longer, I guess. But as I said, you'll notice I had no trouble telling you it might end with them hearing themselves on the radio just as it cuts off. Because, I mean, when you watch a movie like this, what's really spoiler territory? We know this movie, front to back, before it even begins. But they do make it charming enough just with the character work. But even so, yeah, so it's fine. And obviously the performances, while cliche, do still work in the context of the movie, so yeah. So moving on, we'll go to Columbus, which is another movie I didn't really know much about, but I did see it got like Gotham and Spirit Award nominations. So, the plot being that Haley Lou Richardson, who is suddenly appearing in many movies now, a young actress, her and John Cho have a chance meeting, and they're stuck in Columbus. What is it, like Indiana? It's something. They're stuck in a very dead-end place, and basically they explore architecture. yes, this movie is indie from top to bottom. And she has to take care of her mom, who's like an addict and irresponsible. She's the younger daughter, but she's the responsible one. That old thing. And it's a movie that's mostly built on its script. Obviously, it's also very well shot. Like the way the scenes are framed and the way they get the buildings in there. Like, it is a movie that's in love with the architecture of these buildings. It's basically what the whole thing is about. And they do shoot that stuff really well. And the way they decide where exactly characters are going to go and these really kind of big shots, all works fine on a visual level. The dialogue, every now and then, has a little something in there, like when she's talking about how everything around here is great, and how he hasn't bothered to like read into the buildings around him and stuff like that. And his response is something along the lines of like, if you grew up around something, it feels like nothing. Something to that extent. And it's like, there's little things in there to where you kind of think, yeah, where it kind of makes the mind move a little bit, but for the most part, it's all just feels very, it's one of those scripts where, I'm sorry that boring seems to be a theme here, but it's like, at the same time, it was like, I was watching it, and I was listening to this dialogue, and a lot of the time all I could think was, how did these actors read this script without falling asleep? Like, like, I get it if it, like, looks good, but it's like, I can't imagine this shit on paper. It's like, how did an actor read this and think, yeah, this is something I really want to do? Because this dialogue is not, most of it is very, you know, very standard, deep talking, and characters that are, like, prodding each other for their backstories. It's like, their backstory is no different than a lot of other backstories, so it's like, so what do we really have to go on apart from the aesthetic? The performance has kind of something to do with this, too. John Cho, obviously, is very... He's one of those actors, it's like the anti-Galifianakis in Tulip Fever. It's like, this is an actor where you think, oh, the MILF guy, or oh, Harold from Harold and Kumar. But he slips into drama very easily. And it's like, once you see him in this role for a little bit, and he just kind of, when he walks around and he's doing this dialogue, even if the dialogue is, like, painfully uninteresting, he sells it to the point that you're not thinking about the fact that this guy is in comedies. So, I thought he handled that really well. He's kind of missing from the Spirit Award nominations too, so that's kind of a shame. But, and obviously she plays off him well, as well, and there are moments in there that, you know, between them to where they kind of bring you in, but like I said, the dialogue is just so, just standard indie bullshit that that's just what it brings us to. And there's also some moments where it doesn't feel like it's... sometimes it's like, obviously it's an indie movie, but then there are actually cases to where it's like, sometimes technically it feels kind of off. Like, there is a scene when she's talking to Kieran Culkin, or Rory Culkin. It's one of them. I'm pretty sure it's Rory, actually. The youngest one. And the sound levels are off. Like, he's much quieter than she is, even though they're standing across from each other. So stuff like that can get a little distracting if it feels like it's kind of cheaply put together. But then there's other stuff where I like what they do with the sound. There's one particular scene that stands out. It's probably the standout scene in the movie. When she's looking at a building and she's like, this is my favorite building. And he's like, why is that? And she just starts going off on stats or something, like she's a tour guide or something. And he's like, what, you're just saying stuff like, tell me, like, how do you feel about this building? Like, what really makes it your favorite? And the whole idea is to not just, you know, talk blankly. It's like the movie's criticizing its own boring-ass dialogue. So it's not just me. So what it does is it gives her a chance to shut the fuck up and feel. She keeps talking, but the sound goes out and the score rises, and we don't hear what she's saying. We can just see in her expression and the way she's moving when she talks about the building. And so that's you can see that's easily the standout scene in the movie, when they actually just let it... It's very much the show don't tell thing, which this movie really should have taken a lot more from. So, yeah, but it is, for the most part, it is very, very dull. It has the staple scene in all indie movies where we watch her make a fucking sandwich in silence. And it's, it's like, this is, even in a movie about, like, just two people talking about fucking architecture. It's like, I don't think we need a full, real-time sandwich-making scene just to show how fucking indie we are, okay? And it is, and we do have the amazing Parker Posey here. She's a little bit thrown to waste. She's only in, like, a couple of scenes, and she doesn't get anything. Parker Posey's an actress to where if you're gonna hire her, you better fucking give her something juicy. And this movie failed, so that was unfortunate. But the back and forth alone between Haley Richardson and John Cho is fine. It's just the dialogue and the story, and when it's, in most cases, when it's not particularly a back and forth thing, it shows, like, it's very, very dull underlying foundation. So, yeah, but I guess I can see the appeal, especially for, like, the art house crowd, so go ahead. Our next movie is going to be Crown Heights, a movie starring Keith Stanfield that's a true story about a dude who was put away for a crime he didn't commit for, I can't remember if it was either 15 or 20 years, before his friend finally was able to get him out through studying the law. And this is a very interesting story because it's kind of two different things here. It's half this whole law side of the movie and them trying to piece together and how to basically prove his innocence, and the other half we kind of get prison movie. And both of them work on a very small scale level. And the prison aspect, watching Keith Stanfield's character is much more interesting, despite the fact that it's the guy that played his friend that ended up with the Spirit Award nomination and supporting actor. And start off, how you're going to feel about this character might seem complicated because he's innocent for this case, but he's not necessarily an innocent guy. Where it's, like, we see him, he seems to be involved in some shady shit, he steals a car. But that's the thing, though, is, like, he steals a car, he's got some shady shit going on. And yeah, you could say, well, okay, he's probably untrustworthy. The trouble with that thinking is that the crime he's being accused of is a fucking murder, which is something he's very far away from, and something this character is more than likely not capable of. But he just gets caught up in the wrong place, and there's enough evidence that he is locked away for as long as he is. And which obviously is a terrifying thing in itself. And there's, like, obviously, Kafka did a whole thing on this, obviously, but then there's also, you'll notice, though, when you're trying to figure out, you know, is the character an innocent or not, but obviously there's an extreme that takes it to another level to where it's like, whatever this guy's little petty criminal life is, this is not the outcome for him. This is not where this character's supposed to be in life. It obviously very much probably just describing the events of it, even though both of these are true stories. You're obviously probably getting a lot of Fruitvale vibes, and that's definitely what the movie feels like. Like if you were watching Fruitvale, and Oscar Grant was doing his thing, and then he eventually got arrested for a crime much bigger than what he was actually doing, you have this movie. And obviously Keith Stanfield is a very good actor, and he's able to really bring... When you watch him throughout this movie, and you watch the years pass by, obviously he doesn't look too much older. He always does kind of look like Keith Stanfield, but it's the way his body movements and just the way he performs this, you can see to where it's like, this guy looks like he's been in prison for 15 years. You can see the weight of this on him just as the scenes progress and every time we see him again. And knowing all the stuff, like, he's got a family that's growing while he's in here, and every time, and his friend is trying to get this, and every time it looks like there's hope and there's something that could get him out, they always get knocked down and they have to try something else. And they just have to keep going on this and hopefully have another plan when, in cases, not just if, but when the plane is going to drop, they're going to need another one. And they had to do this for 15 or 20 years or however long it was. And it's definitely very interesting with some really good performances, and That's really what the core of it is. Because yeah, the stuff on the outside of the prison stuff isn't completely. I mean, I suppose there's always enough interest for people if it's something that really happened. But I was much more interested in watching Keith Stanfield's character and how he was dealing with this on the inside, not so much what they were doing on the outside to try to get him out, even though that in itself is enough material to be its own movie. I just thought the Keith Stanfield stuff was a lot stronger and more attention-grabbing, the way it was portrayed in this particular movie, so... but that's still definitely a recommendation to track this down, so... Yeah. Our next one is going to be Beach Rats, another movie that got a few, or at least a couple of Spirit Award nominations, including its lead actor, whose name is... I got this. Harris Dickinson, I believe. We're gonna go with that. And this is a movie that's kind of having... I hate to be, like, such a downer, because I feel like I'm hating on so much stuff lately, but, this is a movie that I'm not really... I'm wondering how I would feel about it if I saw it about 5 years ago, because obviously we've really taken off, with, gay-themed movies, particularly about young guys, has taken on its own genre, basically, in the past few years. And obviously we saw, like, what's to be one of the quintessential ones with Moonlight. And it's like, Moonlight has now set a bar so high, it's like, where are you going to go now? It's like, I'm really interested in how I'm going to be affected by Call Me By Your Name, being so close, being, like, the very next year after Moonlight, and supposedly being as good as it is. And then you have movies like Beach Rats that are, like, down here, kind of in hiding, with these other ones being kind of put on the pedestal. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason movies like Beach Rats they have their own acclaim, for sure, but that they don't reach the heights of something like Moonlight. And you realize, that I'm afraid that the way some of these are in this kind of indie young gay genre here, that these movies are going to start blending together. I'm not gonna be able to really remember which one is which, because they all kind of have the same feel about them. And this one in particular does that. Like, because Moonlight felt so different because Barry Jenkins had such a unique vision in the way he portrayed that movie and what that movie looks like. And it's like when you think back to Moonlight, the very first thing you think of is, like, it's not necessarily a line, even though it has an Oscar-winning performance in it, not even performances. You just think about what it fucking looked like, usually in scenes where nobody's fucking talking, because Moonlight just really had something really special that it just captured. And like this, it almost feels like they're just kind of being cranked out when you look at movies like Beach Rats. And it's like, to where Beach Rats is a good-looking movie, aesthetically, but there doesn't really seem to be like an investment in it. There are definitely moments where the lead character can be very interesting, and Dickinson's performance certainly helps that. Like his Indie Spirit nomination, I'm okay with, but that's the thing, is it's only every now and then where we really reach something with this character where it feels like we're seeing something really interesting, or there's something that we feel like is about to be revealed, or something that we're going to see kind of, come out of his personality or his character to tell us exactly how he's going into the situation and how it's changing him or not changing him, or who he is, like how that's going to affect how he's going to react to this. But it's like, it's a lot of blue balls, this movie, quite honestly. The events of it kind of too. But the thing is because there's the whole, basically the idea is he meets up with dudes, but then once his friends find out about that, he's gotta be like he's pretending to be gay just so he can take drugs from them. So, but the thing here is, it is a movie, to its credit, that also kind of takes that approach of all the different ways this character changes and the way he reacts are often done without dialogue. You just kind of have to watch him, and you can see what's going through his head and how he's changing by just looking at him, or what exactly is his reaction to something without him having to say anything. But we have the whole thing where he has to pretend that he's he's closeted through the whole movie, so even so you really kind of struggle with your like wordage exactly here. But there's obviously the stretch of the movie when he has to basically put on a front for this very attractive girl that's into him, and he has to be into her in more ways than one, which is difficult for him. And then we just kind of, it's almost like a very episodic nature, this movie, because it starts off with his dad dying from cancer, and then that's eventually reaches its point, and then we go into the whole him putting on a front for the girl thing, then that reaches a point, then we go into the whole him hiding it from his friends thing, and we just kind of do it in segments. There's not really things that are kind of, there's not really a cohesive thing here that's just working towards something and kind of building to something. It's just like, this is what happens with this character, and this is how it affects his sexuality or whatever, then this, and then this. And then it just kind of comes to a stop. It kind of just, it feels like just when it's like gonna take us somewhere, and we're gonna really get to see what this character can do, and how he's going to handle his situations here, and we just stop. See what I mean about the blue balls thing? We just, there's just, it's like I don't know, it's kind of frustrating, but, and I understand that that's, if you're frustrated while watching an indie movie, 9 times out of 10 you're supposed to be frustrated, but, because that's the intent, but, I don't know, that's just another one of those cases where after watching it, it's just kind of like, okay, there definitely was an interest in watching this character, but once it's all said and done, what did you really say? What did you really do for him? How did your portrayal of him, what is that particularly saying about him? For other people, I'm sure it's probably very blatant. And once again, like I talked about with Moonlight, maybe as like a straight guy, there's something in these movies, even though I can really love them, like I love Moonlight or Brokeback, that maybe if there's something really deeply personal in there, it's something that's going to go over my head, and I will never catch on to it, and I won't be able to feel what, say, a gay person watching it would feel. And that could be the case, but here I just feel like I said, I don't know if it's just that it's just in this place now to where it's like a lot of these, you know, indie gay dramas seem to be kind of just running together at this point, unless they really stand out like Barry Jenkins could do. I don't know if that is adding to this kind of lack of impact or what, but like I said, if this had come out 5 years ago, before this was really kind of its own genre, or at least much more in the mainstream than it is now, or much more in the public attention than it is now, I don't know, so there's, yeah, it's really hard to say. I suppose technically it's always been there if you go back to like Scorpio Rising or something, but I mean, as far as most people being aware of it, not just the, you know, film buffs that have to search for these movies like in the depths, they're all kind of up here, at least front and center in the indie scene now, unless they go into Oscar glory, so yeah, this is another one where I don't feel like it really, it just kind of feels like it's in the down here chain and not necessarily one that really comes forward, and it just all kind of feels, it does kind of feel surface level a bit, and it does, like the more good looking the movie is, the more it makes it feel like they're trying to cover up how surface level most of everything else is, the emotion, all that stuff, but yeah, so that's how I feel about that. Our next one is going to be Brad Status, a movie starring Ben Stiller. It looks like a Noah Baumbach movie, it acts like a Noah Baumbach movie, it stars Ben Stiller like a Noah Baumbach movie, but it's not one. And this is one of those movies where it really, really depends how you feel about the main character is going to decide how you feel about the rest of the movie, too. Because we follow this guy around, and this is such an overused term in today's society, and like the whole, just all the kind of terminology. But I mean, you look at this guy, and the one word that comes to mind is cringe. Like, this might as well be fucking cringe in the movie. Because every single time, every single decision Stiller makes in this movie, everything Stiller says, everything he does in this movie, you want to watch like this. Because it's just, there is so much secondhand embarrassment from this guy. And I know that's the point, I think. I think. So, or this could be like a projection thing from the writer's perspective. I don't know. But basically what the title refers to is the fact that Brad Stiller's character is one of those guys that is very unhappy because he's constantly comparing his life to his more successful friends. His more successful friends are, I had no idea how many people were in this movie. Michael Sheen, Luke Wilson, Jermaine Clement, and Mike White. And we get, some of them are only in, like Mike White, I don't even think Mike White had lines. We just showed him occasionally. Luke Wilson has like one big scene. And then Jermaine gets to do his Jermaine thing, but the big focus here is Michael Sheen as the guy that he supposedly has always been competitive with. And they have some really interesting scenes together, but it's, like I said, it really just depends on how you take this character. He's also married to Jenna Fisher, but doesn't seem to be. There's always something. He's like, this is one of those movies where he's like constantly fantasizing. But the one thing the movie does strongly about those fantasies is it doesn't necessarily feel like a character gimmick, because we've all kind of been that person. Like, we all sit back and we just kind of think about what could be, and we get so lost in those thoughts. Sometimes we might get so lost in them we forget they're not real, and we're actually just sitting here fucking doing nothing when we should be where we are in our fucking daydreams. So that kind of stuff really kind of hits if you're that kind of person. And so, but yeah, throughout it, it's just kind of like, it really, I don't really know how else to go into this. As far as the performances go, obviously Stiller has played parts like this before, particularly in Noah Baumbach movies. And he still does that. It doesn't necessarily feel like he's doing the same kind of character here. It still feels like this character in particular, it's like, this is the kind of, like, this is the guy that Ted Strowman probably would be had he not gotten together with Mary at the end. This is about, and then the whole complete lack of confidence, but then as the movie goes on, we realize maybe everybody's personality isn't quite what it seems, and maybe the way we see other people is not it at all. And so there is something here, but the movie only has so much strength. It's very, like, at the same time it feels very much like it's going a bit far, but at the same time it also doesn't quite feel, it feels almost too small too. So it never really quite found that kind of gray area it probably should have been, to really find a groove, but it's, yeah, as far as spending like an hour 40 or so with this character, really just depends on your patience with that. I do think I think he would be relatable enough for people to see him that way, but also can see him as a walking embarrassment. So it really just depends. I don't know how many more times I can tell you that. That's really, so I think it's okay. It does feel like it has a bit of a pacing problem, and it feels like it's really taken its fucking time to kind of kick into gear, but when it does, if you can really decipher when this movie has officially kicked into gear, it depends, but here, there are moments when, like, there'll be long scenes of dialogue, or you're kind of waiting for something to kind of slowly play out, and those scenes are kind of strong, but, and it does come to a touching conclusion, so, yeah, it's okay, but it's really just, it feels like you're kind of putting up with this character a lot of the time. And I guess you could, in a sense, you could say that's effective, if that's the whole point, but, yeah, it still just doesn't, there's just something about it that's not, it doesn't feel as engaging as it should have. Like, you feel like it's on the cusp of being as engaging as it should be, but it never quite reaches that. So there's just that little something in there that's kind of missing. Whatever that might be, whether it's a bite, I can't really put my finger on it, but yeah, but it's okay. Especially if this is your kind of movie where you just like to watch a dude just watch a dude's confidence constantly crumble. Just all the bad luck. So yeah, and whether or not a person brings that on themselves, and that can be addressed. So yeah. Alright, our last two are going to be an Aubrey Plaza double feature. Yeah. The first of which is going to be Ingrid Goes West. not the movie I thought it was going to be by that title. So we start off and we see Ingrid, Aubrey Plaza, obviously, weeping while reading Instagram posts. And these Instagram posts are from, like, the most basic girl ever, and she's getting married. And apparently Ingrid hasn't been invited to this wedding. And she's really upset about it because Ingrid is unhinged. So Ingrid is looking at all these wedding posts on her Instagram, then decides to show up uninvited to the wedding and douse the bride in pepper spray because she wasn't invited. And then it turns out that, like, she's had a mother that's just died. She may or may not have been in an institution. And so there's clearly something legitimately wrong with her. But before we can really delve into that, we are immediately in her next, like, God knows how many times this has happened. It's like watching fucking Creep again. And she finds Elizabeth Olsen on Instagram. And she's just like this model or whatever. She's one of those people where, like, companies pay her to post shit on Instagram. And Ingrid decides, I want to be best friends with her. So she basically stalks her and does the whole thing. It kind of turns into... Well, the first thing, obviously, you'll think of is single white female. She even does the thing where she colors her hair like her. But this is one of those movies where it's basically single white female. But then, over an hour into the movie, somebody says, oh my fucking god, this is like single white female. And it's like, dude, if you're gonna say that you're like a movie, if you're gonna acknowledge you're like a movie, do it before the fucking hour mark. Do it at the beginning or something. But if you want to take away from single white female, to me it started to feel more like, sort of like The Talented Mr. Ripley, actually. A little bit. But yeah, single white female is obviously in there, and it sucks when he says that over an hour into the movie, because then it occurs to you and it's like, oh, so it was basically their whole plan to just fucking copy single white female, and it's like, well, if we say we're doing that, that makes it okay. But anyway, so she tracks down Elizabeth Olsen and her husband, who is Wyatt Russell, and she stays in an apartment. Her landlord is O'Shea Jackson Jr., and who has a Batman obsession that brings on quite a few funny lines. But the question throughout the whole movie I had was, is this a comedy? Because there's obviously funny moments like O'Shea Jackson Jr.'s obsession with Batman, which ultimately leads to this bizarre Catwoman fetish scene, if that's your thing. Go right ahead. But it's like, this is one of those movies where I'm not quite sure if the awkwardness is supposed to be the comedy of it, or if it's supposed to be almost a thriller. Like, it was really unclear to me. You immediately want to think it's a comedy because Aubrey Plaza is the star of it. But it really, to me, didn't feel like they were playing it as a comedy. Like, we're supposed to legitimately find her disturbing, and that this is really weird. So, as the movie goes on, I kind of found that intriguing, because Aubrey Plaza is actually really good in this. Like, really good. There's even moments where she doesn't even, not that this is like a, like an insult, but there are times where she doesn't even look like herself. Especially after she's changed the hair color. Like, it completely changes her appearance, and it's like... and as it goes on, there is, I just had some really weird deja vu just now. Have I said that before? I don't know. But, anyway, it's also like 2 in the morning. So... so she does become friends with Elizabeth Olsen, and then the question throughout the whole movie is, how long can this possibly go on until somebody picks up on it? And is she legitimately insane, or just really sad and lonely? The sad and lonely thing kind of goes out the window pretty early, and we get the vibe that she's really fucking insane. But it's like, how is the movie going to deal with that? And every now and then we go in an interesting direction. There's a really nice scene by the pool with her and Wyatt Russell, where... once again, it's like stuff is revealed to us, and it makes us realize that Ingrid obviously is hiding who she really is, but she may not be the only one. And then there's something really interesting introduced into the movie with that, and we start to see all the characters in totally different ways. So there's good stuff like that, but then there's stuff like the kidnapping thing, where it's like the movie seems like it's going to suddenly go really over the top. And then it just doesn't. Like, it's gonna, like, I don't know what's worse. If it had just suddenly gone totally over the top, or the fact that it looks like it's going to and then just fucking quits on it. And then it's like, I don't know. So that's kind of a shame when it does stuff like that, but the thing that really keeps the movie alive is Plaza's performance, and the fact that you're really not quite sure. Like, Ingrid is actually... You can tell she's insane, but she's also so good at blending in and hiding that she can... I mean, sometimes it's blatantly obvious, but I think that's because we know. But if we were Elizabeth Olsen, even though the whole idea is that she's just oblivious to everything around her because that's just the way she is, that maybe if she just took more than 2 glances at Ingrid, she'd realize this person's unstable, this person's not who they say they are. But I do think that there are moments where she really plays it well, where it's the whole hiding that aspect of herself and actually trying to come off normal. But for every moment where she comes off normal, there's like a look that's like, oh yeah, I forgot this person's a fucking psychopath. So, yeah, it's very... And this is one of those cases where the main character might be off-putting to an audience, but I actually found her quite intriguing, and I think Plaza's performance has a lot to do with that. In the direction they go, honestly, if there's one enormous problem with this movie, apart from the ones I mentioned, it's the fact that the ending, what in God's name, this is a movie you could actually make a sequel to. I'm not, like, suggesting that or anything, but you really could with the way this movie ends, because we see the way the character reacts to the things that have happened to her, most of which are bad or negative. So then when we reach the end scene, and this is the outcome, you're immediately left with the question of, okay, what the fuck does this character do with this? Like, what is her life now? Because I doubt she's suddenly sane now. So what does she do with this? And, like, maybe that's intentionally meant as, like, a cliffhanger ending. I don't know, but it's a weird place to end because it just leaves you with so many... What happens now? And not in the, oh, what an effective movie. It shows how much it drew me in because I wanted more when it ended. No. It's more like, no, you don't end the movie there. This is something we actually need to know. How does she use this? What is going to happen now? The audience must know this. So I don't know how I feel about that ending. So that's there. So yeah, take that for what you will. Let's go into the last movie. I don't know how long we've been going now, but our last movie is going to be the other Aubrey Plaza movie this year, The Little Hours, that, her dude, I don't know if it's her husband or boyfriend or what, Jeff Baena, who is he wrote the script and he directed it. And this was a movie where you could just tell by the advertisements was an excuse to make a dirty movie with nuns. Because they thought the concept was funny, but they didn't really have a whole lot of ideas after the concept. This movie screams, all we fucking had was a concept when we started writing it. And, and it just failed and failed until they got to an ending, and then they actually fucking made the thing. So... so we have Alison Brie, Kate McCurdy, and Aubrey Plaza as the nuns, and their, like, superior is Molly Shannon. We've got the priest, who is John C. Reilly, and other recognizable faces coming into that, like Nick Offerman and Fred Armisen and the like. And the plot here is that Dave Franco has been sleeping with Nick Offerman's wife. Nick Offerman's going to have him executed, so Dave Franco escapes. John C. Reilly finds him, takes him to the nuns, and he poses as a deaf-mute gardener. And eventually is sexually attracted to all of them, and they do dirty things, and because they're nuns doing and saying dirty things, we're supposed to laugh hysterically or something. So, and they have no idea what they want to do, because they immediately set up that they're in the 1300s, but then the very next scene is them yelling at the previous gardener just for talking to them, because he's not supposed to, but they scream like, yeah, fuck you, fuck off, fuck whatever. Very modern-day language. And I was like, okay, so that's the gimmick, that they're in, like, the 1300s, they're in all this, you know, old-timey attire, all these old-timey settings, whatever, but they're speaking in modern-day language. Okay, God, I don't know how far you can take this, but okay, I get what you're doing. but then they don't even stick to that, because there's a whole joke. There's a lot of jokes about basically how old-timey people would have dealt with this, or the moment when Dave Franco is confessing, and he's talking about the stuff he was doing with Nick Offerman's wife. He's talking about, like, coming on her face and coming on her tits and stuff like that. But he says it like, I laid my seed upon her bosom. And it's supposed to be funny because he's saying, I came on her tits in an old-timey way. But why is he talking like that when a lot of the other characters are speaking in modern-day language? Is there a joke here? Which one is the joke? That they speak in modern-day language or that they speak in old-timey language? Because it's not really funny if you're doing both, so yeah. But the thing is even if they did stick to one, it probably still wouldn't be very funny. That's the problem. That's the movie's problem. Is it's supposed to be this really big, broad comedy, and it's just not funny. I don't really recall a scene that I laughed off the top of my head. Maybe something Fred Armisen said, because Fred Armisen is always funny no matter what. Maybe something John C. Reilly did, I don't know, but I don't remember laughing, really. And then they continue on with this, and there's hardly... It's basically a one-joke thing. Once they set up that Dave Franco's character is pretending to be deaf-mute, and it gets dirty. But then there's a moment where they throw witches into it. Jemima Hirk is in those scenes, and I don't... And after a while, it's like, I don't even think... I think they just had scenes planned, but nothing particularly cohesive to do with them. So, like, about... The movie's only like an hour 20-something, and it's like, by the time they reach the hour mark, it's like they're just putting in these disjointed scenes they didn't really know how to fit into the plot, but they wanted to do anyway. So... Yeah, and they tried to really play it up, like, I guess they had, like, some... like, religious organization or something watch it. Maybe it was, like, the church itself or something, and they just put on there, like, pure garbage, and they actually had that with all the critic comments. And it's like, just, like, talking about that, like I said, you just look at the poster, like, even before, like, I remember seeing the poster before they even released the trailer, and as soon as I saw the poster, it's like, well, that's a fucking one-joke idea, I guarantee it. And I don't typically, you know, want to go into movies closed-minded like that, but it's like... And sure enough, you see the movie, and yeah, that's what it is. It's a dirty movie with nuns, and that concept itself is supposed to be consistently hilarious for an hour and a half, when they don't offer anything else. So, and like, they do the whole thing about Kei Mikochi is like the one that's really, like, really, like, conservative or whatever, but she's the one that ends up taking everything off and running around naked and screaming with, like, paint on her face. And it's... Yeah, we get it. We've seen that joke. We've seen all the damn jokes in this movie, so... This was just... This is another one of those movies where it's like, I'm not really quite sure what the point was. Maybe because Aubrey Plaza and Jeff Baena are a real-life couple, they wanted to work together. Maybe because Dave Franco and Alison Brie are a real couple, and they work together. Did I say Alison Brie when I was talking about who was in this? I may have called her Brie Larson by accident. I don't remember. So, and yeah, Dave Franco being one of the main characters, as you know if you've been watching these, I'm still not a Dave Franco fan. He just really has no appeal to me whatsoever. I'm not sure. I don't know how The Disaster Artist is going to change that, but maybe. I guess we'll see, but... Yeah, I do feel like that the actresses, when the four of them get together, Aubrey Plaza, Alison Brie, Jemima Hirk, and Kei Mikochi, when they're all four together in those scenes, like the scene when they're, like, drunk and shit, makes me think that these four actresses would have great chemistry in another movie, but the stupid shit they're doing in this movie isn't cutting it, so it's like, I feel like there was something in there, and I could probably, based on that, I could probably see where they were like, hey, we could make this work as a whole movie. But, no, not with this shit. Not with this material. No way. So, yep. That's what it is. Oh yeah, Paul Reiser's in there for like 2 seconds for some reason. So take that for what you will. Alright, so tomorrow we will have our other Vietnam versus with Apocalypse Now and Deer Hunter, and then whatever else. Hopefully, by the time I see, like, Coco and Brum and J. Israel Esquire and stuff like that, hopefully we get 3 billboards outside of Missouri on that. It's supposed to be wide released next Friday on the 1st, hopefully. So, I guess we'll see what we're working with by the time that happens, and then we'll go from there. And like I said, you will be getting another one of these in probably like a couple of weeks or something. So, yeah, hopefully there's a much more interesting batch to work with. But in the meantime, I think we're going to finish this here. So,